Hello, besties and bosses. How are we doing? I've got a conversation today. We're going to talk, it's Halloween week. We've got to be Halloween themed. So, we're talking about scary clients and how to banish them before they put a stake in your revenue. I do, before we dive into this, because if I don't say this, it's just like chewing at my brain and my heart, and it has been since the shutdown happened, and I'm sure it is for many of you. So I feel like if I just don't name this, I will not be able to focus on our conversation. But it just feels really important to name. I think the real scary thing happening right now is, we just had another strike in Gaza, and the shutdown in the U.S., for those of you who aren't aware, is affecting so many people's jobs. It is affecting the potentially healthcare. It is affecting potentially food assistance as far as or as soon as November 1st. And I think that's the real scary thing going on. So we're not going to talk about that today because I am not a government policy expert, but I do think it's important to name because I think a lot of us are thinking about this, holding this. If you're not aware, I invite you to look into it if you're in the US, and to look into the things you can take action on, which I like to remember. There are still elections going on. I know I'm voting in New York City this week. There are still our reps we can call. They work for us. You can call them every day. And for those of you who are financially resourced, donations to food banks, monetary donations. I did a short bit of research on this. Any donation obviously is going to be beneficial. I think food, in terms of like proteins, are probably the most beneficial if you're doing food. But if you are financially able, a monetary donation to a local food bank, because they can stretch dollars. What did I read? It's like $1 into 36. They can stretch a dollar. They're really skilled at that, so they can, if we bring some food, that's helpful. But if we gave them even $5, $25, $100, they're able to really maximize that to feed far more mouths than most of us are able to in terms of where they're getting food supplies from. So I just need to name that because we're going to talk business stuff. That's also really important because if we make money, we are able to also pour money back into our economy. I don't talk about this a lot, but I make a donation. I don't talk about this a lot just because I don't want to make this about me, but I think it's helpful right now just for context. My business makes a donation every single month thanks to my clients. Often we make multiple donations. I think we made 5 this month, including one to a local food bank, which is thanks to my clients. I make it in my clients' names. It is not thanks to me. Yes, I'm allocating dollars there, but that is because I have a business that is thriving and successful and sustainable, and literally because of my clients and their investments, and because of them, I'm able to do that. So I am going to pivot to talk business, but it feels important to say that, and I just use that as an example for things we can all do when we are making money in our business. Yes, it's beautiful to have the lifestyle and all the things, but we also get to use our dollars in that beautiful way. I know I want to thank my clients for that, because if I didn't have my incredible clients, I wouldn't be able to get to use my dollars to make donations or to pour back. But I am going to pivot to business for the rest of the conversation for that reason, because if our businesses are thriving, if we're making money, we're also able to use that money to pour back into the causes we care about. And I invite you, if that is something that is meaningful to you and you have the resources, to consider doing that yourself. Okay, let's talk about scary clients though, because I think this is actually, yes, it's a Halloween themed topic, but this is something that I think is even more prevalent. It kind of picks up on the conversation we were having last week. I think it's been a bigger thing I've been having conversations with clients around, and I think this can really wreak havoc with your revenue and with your ability to scale your business specifically. And so I want to talk about what scary clients are, how this can impact your business aside from the immediate kind of frustration of it, how I really see it limit or cap, how I see clients subconsciously tap their capacity and their ability to scale their business because of this, why I think it's happening more. And then we'll talk a little bit about how I coach my clients to navigate these situations so that they, so it's not putting a stake in their revenue. If you're live here or listening on the replay, please feel free to drop comments, questions, anything like that. I always want to make sure this is beneficial for you. Okay, so in terms of what's a scary client, a spooky, scary client, if you've been in business long enough, if you haven't, I am not trying to freak you out or to create a horror story, but this will probably happen because it's just part of business. But you've probably had a client ghost you. You've probably had a client default on a payment. You've probably had a client try to break a contract or break a contract. Maybe you've had clients who get mad at you, who don't listen, who say they're not getting results, who asked for a refund, who took one course module and said that your method didn't work, who don't respect your boundaries, who leave you 25-minute boxers, right? You probably had something that feels like, oh my gosh, this is a nightmare, like scary client situation. So obviously you don't want your whole business to be filled with clients like this. If this is happening all the time, or it's, majority of clients, if you were a client of mine, I would want to dig into what's going on there. Why are we attracting this? Why do we have a haunted house as a business? But if this happens from time to time, this really is just a normal part of business. And so I think that's just important to name, because I think it's really easy for us to see an isolated situation like this and to, instead of see this as the outlier, create and globalize. This is what our brains like to do, right? We have one pain point. We want to make sure it never ever happens again. Our brain wants to protect us from something. And so we tend to then almost like overcorrect. But that overcorrection can actually cause a lot of problems in business, because oftentimes this is an outlier case, and the overcorrection can create a new problem. We talked about that last week, so I don't want to talk about that today. Listen to last week's live stream if that feels really relevant for you. So this is normal. If that happens as an outlier case, that doesn't mean you're a bad coach, a bad therapist, a bad OBM, a bad designer, a bad lawyer. It doesn't mean you're a bad business owner. It means you're running a business and you're serving humans, and you're serving more humans. And as your business scales, generally, most of us, unless you have a one-on-one model like me, but even with my business, right, as I've scaled, I have more people in my audience, I have more humans, right? As we scale, we are just going to interact with more humans. Part of scaling is having the capacity to hold more humans in our audience, to hold more humans in our containers, to hold more humans and their stuff, right? Along with, yes, holding more revenue or holding more team. So I think just seeing this is a normal part of scaling, because if we're interacting with humans, right, the smaller the pool of humans, right, the more we can control how every single situation is. But unless we're going to try to micromanage our businesses, right, this could happen with clients, it could happen with team. But the reason I want to have this conversation, what I have noticed, I have been coaching for 11, 12 years. I've been in business coaching, meaning I've been getting paid for coaching for almost a decade this March, as a high-level, high-touch, one-on-one coach, so being very intimately working with my clients, having a deep relationship with them. And what I've noticed is it's not these like scary clients themselves that derail someone's business or that mess with you, but it's what happens after you have a scary client and the fear from that, and what we do as a response that can really affect the results in your business. So that's what we're going to dive into more today. Again, let me know if you've ever had a scary client. And I'll raise both hands. I mean, I think this is just helpful to name. I've been in business, again, like I just said, a decade in March. So, and I only do one-on-one for those of you who don't know me. And I generally have about 22, 23 clients. So between 20 to 25 one-on-one clients at any given time. And over my almost decade in business, of course, I've had a couple of, in air quotes, scary clients or these situations pop up. And what we're talking about here, it's been so important for me to navigate the things we're talking about here. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to continue to hold that many clients or to scale my revenue. Our revenue's grown by 23% this year. I wouldn't be able to do that. And I would probably want to burn my business down. I would probably be scared of having one-on-one. I would probably want to push away one-on-one clients if that weren't the case. So I think what happens when we have a particularly scary client situation that can feel particularly triggering to us in terms of it, or where it really affects our sense of safety in terms of maybe finances because someone asked for a refund or someone wanted money back or when it affects our sense of enoughness or worth because someone is attacking the quality of your product or program or saying they didn't get results. I think even when it's not a monetary thing, but when it's a client who is particularly, let's say, draining, or like I kind of made a joke, but I've had a client send me an hour-long video before in between sessions as a like needing a response. I mean, that's longer than my client sessions. Like when we have those sorts of things happening, when you have someone who is not understanding your boundaries or how the container is set up, right? I know some of my clients are like, my clients aren't listening, right? When you have clients you feel like aren't listening, we can talk about that more in a second too, but or who feel like they're really combative, right? All of these different situations that can feel like whatever your definition of a scary client is, it's usually because it triggers for you, something that makes you feel like you're either in control of your business or feeling safe in your business. And so when that happens, what I see as the fallout is we tend to want to overcorrect, and we fear this ever happening again. And so I see this kind of play out in a couple of different ways. I either see this mean we then think, I need to put up massive, massive, massive boundaries to make sure this never happens again, right? Like a pendulum swing. Or I've seen, I have a couple of clients where the story becomes, I don't have capacity, right? And so I can't scale, right? And then what I see a lot is I see a subconscious block. Like this isn't something that's conscious, but this fear that I want to make sure, I want to protect myself and make sure this never ever happens again. And so the way I'm going to do that is just never to have a problem, scary client. And so what I see either happen is we decide we need an entirely different type of client. We need an entirely different client avatar. We need clients who make more money, who make less money, who basically don't have a problem and don't need to be coached. Again, we need to have like all these extra boundaries, or we need to have a different offer. We need to not do, if you're me, for example, it would be like me saying I'm not going to do one-on-one anymore because I'm not going to put up with this shit, right? Like we can burn down those things, or we will subconsciously block and push away more clients because internally we think this could happen again. We want to make sure this never happens. And so in that case, what I see happen with clients a lot is they will say, I want to make more money. I want to make more money. I want to book more clients. I want to scale my business. And they'll take all the right actions, but they will have a really hard time bringing in more clients, or when they do, they will essentially sabotage and have different things and situations happen to lose clients, to lose sales, to lose revenue, because it just feels really unsafe in their system to have more, because they don't want more of this to happen, because it feels like something they can't handle, or it feels very triggering, or unsafe. Let me know if this is making sense, or if you want more clarification there. I think this is important to name. I wrote a post about this last week. I think this is happening even more this year, quite honestly. And I think there are more scary clients. I'm probably going to get hate for saying this, but I think it's just important to name, because we have had so much discussion about being in the trust recession, and there's been, as there should be, there's been so much vocalized about the problematic coaches and programs in our space that aren't delivering. This is a little bit of what we were talking about in last week's live stream, in terms of kind of the overcompensation that can happen there when you are someone who wants to not be like part of the problem. But what I also see is, look, and I have heard some wild fucking stories from clients in terms of what they've experienced in containers. So there is a reason there is a trust recession. There is a reason that people are pissed they've been burned. There's a reason, today's conversation is not about that, but we could have said scary programs in the online space, scary coaches, because I have heard some wild shit where I'm like, how? Anyway, that's not today's conversation, because I will go down a rabbit hole. But I think it's important to name, those things have happened, and that is a certain subsect of the industry. But what I think this has done is, I'm thinking how I want to name this, it has created such a story that programs and coaches are to blame. And some are. I really want to be mindful there, right? We all, as service providers, we all have a responsibility to show up for our clients and their investments. We all have a responsibility to deliver on what we're putting a price tag next to. That is our job, right? We have that responsibility. And we are, as service providers, working with clients who also have a responsibility to their investments, to show up for their investments, right? To get the most out of their investments, to implement, right? Like, it is a co-creation, whether you sell a course or a group program or a mastermind or a one-on-one service like me, right? There are two parties here that both have a responsibility. So absolutely, service providers have a responsibility, and so do clients. And so I think what has happened with the trust recession, and I think this is important to speak to in terms of why I think this is happening more and more, what I think this has unintentionally done is I think it has created a bit of hate to say, I'm not calling anybody out. I think it's just helpful for all of us who are service providers to understand what's happening. I think it has created a bit of a victim mindset in certain clients who then feel like they are just because they've spent money on something, even if they don't watch the modules, even if they don't come to the program, even if they don't come to the calls, even if they don't utilize the between session support, even if they don't show up to do the work, even if they don't realize where they're at in their learning curve, that they are not responsible for the results, that it is all the coaches, service providers, the lawyers' fault. Like, it is all somebody else's fault. And I think the noise because of the trust recession is amplified that, right? And it's made it really easy for someone to, I just supported a client with this. She has an excellent program with excellent client track records. She is so supportive in that program. And someone went through like a module and said the program didn't work and the method didn't work. You can see how much someone has consumed in that. And I think it makes it very easy then for someone to go and complain about a program without all of that context, right? And to get a lot of other people who are frustrated, because it's also just hard to get results in anything, whether it's business or fitness or health or relationships. Most of us are supporting people through things that do require implementation and learning curves and growth and whatever to actually like implement the program. And so it just makes it's very easy to get a lot of people complaining, me too. And so I think what this has done is created even more of what we're calling the scary clients. It's, I think, just emboldened people to lean into that and to say, well, this isn't my fault that I didn't get a result. Like, fuck this program, right? I want a refund. I want to ghost. It's okay if I ghost. Or quite honestly, to be unintentionally entitled because the online space has said you should be able to get, like, all of these programs are bad and wrong, and if you don't get results overnight or without really trying, right? We're in the soft era. If you have to do anything, if you struggle at all, if this isn't easy for you, then blame, like, it is definitely the program's fault because you should be able to have this happen, right? And so unintentionally, I don't think people are intentionally being this way. I think it also just sucks to struggle, right? And when we struggle, we want to project, we want to find anyone outside of ourselves to blame. But I think because of the trust recession, I think that is getting amplified. And so it is easier then to place blame, and it is easier to have an entitlement in terms of what we think we are owed when we spend $97 or $9,000. And so I think that is making this more I've had more conversations this year. I want to hear these comments. I want to hear these comments. I'm gonna read these in a second, but I've just had more conversations with clients. And again, I'm like in it with my clients, so I just obviously get to hear more of this. But so many more of these this year than I have probably in my last couple of years combined. And I know my clients really well. Many of them I have worked with for years and years and years, like, and they're all very good people. Like, I know their hearts as well, and I know how much they pour. Many of them, if anything, I have to support them around not burning out because they're over delivering, they're overcompensating. Like, they tend towards that side. So it's not because they're a problem in the industry. I would either coach them very harshly or probably fire them as a client. Quite honestly, I have fired one client in the past because of a lack of integrity. Just to say here, it is because we are seeing, so if I'm having more of those conversations with clients, it's because we're just seeing more of this happen. So I think that's important to normalize and just understand why. Brittany says, I think that's where I am. Oh, so interesting. In terms of the being, I think what you're saying is in terms of almost being scared to take on clients, or almost subconsciously pushing them away because of this fear. And Tara says, I've heard some crazy stories too, which is really unfortunate. It's happening on both sides. Yeah, I think, Tara, and I think it's just so important to name that. This is not now clients are the bad. I love my clients so much. Most clients are great. I think most people are not what we're talking about. Just like what you're saying, Tara, I've heard some very unfortunate, really fucked up stories. But most service providers are great too, right? These are outliers, and it is causing challenges on both sides. And I think it's really important we understand that, because this one in particular, both, right? Last week we talked about, because of the problematic coaches and service providers and programs, how that's affecting us. Now this week we're talking about how it's affecting us on the client side. So if you all didn't see or listen to last week's live stream, it might be relevant for you, because we're kind of talking about more of the service provider side and how the impact is on that. That was our conversation last week. So again, I think this makes sense. And I think it's just helpful for us to understand, it then makes sense why this is happening and why a client would become a scary client in different ways. And then I think there are also just things in terms of, it is just a harder time to exist as a human right now for multiple reasons. And if you're serving clients who are struggling with things and there aren't clear boundaries or things in place, right, it is just easy for someone to be more clingy or to project more or to get mad or frustrated. And so I think we have to talk a little bit about like what's normal and not a scary client, because I do think sometimes we can take our clients stuff on and not understand what's normal versus what is, a toxic, scary client behavior. But what I think is important here with this conversation is when this is happening, if you've had this experience, instead of, we'll talk about how I coach clients around this, instead of leaning into some ways to create more safety and to know that you can handle this, like we talked about last week, it's very easy to get into the good girl conditioning, high achiever pattern overlap and to over deliver, to overcompensate, to overhold responsibility. And more than anything, what I really see is a subconscious block that says, I do not want more of this, right? If we think about how our brain is designed, our brain is not designed or wired for success. Our brain is wired for safety and survival. If you have had something threaten your safety and survival, AKA a scary client, right, who's wants to come after you, who's triggered you, who's yelled at you, who's called you out, who hasn't paid you and affected your revenue, who did a chargeback, who blamed you for something that wasn't your fault, whatever. Insert all of the things here, right? That can, I hate to, like, I'm not trying to like create a scary story. It's just like these things do happen. Who's abusive in the container, who's narcissistic in the container, right? All of these different things that can happen. If that happens and that feels like a threat, your subconscious isn't logically going, that was one person. Your subconscious is saying, that was bad, that was scary, that was a threat to our safety and survival. How do we make sure this never, ever, ever, ever happens again? And again, it's not logic. This isn't like logic reasoning. It is, you're in your like primitive mind here, and it is a fear response. It is a subconscious like protective mechanism here that is saying, great, we will just put up a block, right? We just don't want any more of this, because let's just make sure this never happens again, right? So we either go to the overcompensation, which we talked about last week, or we just go to, nope, not open for business, no more. And this is where I think, or I just don't have any more capacity, right? I got nothing else to give. And both of those are really big challenges if you want to scale your business. I mean, if you want to grow your business, but also if you want to scale your business, because I always say scaling is solving for a capacity problem. It's really tough to scale if you have no more capacity. If you're just saying, I'm at capacity, right? Like that is one of our most valuable resources as entrepreneurs. And if you're limiting that, right, like that challenges you. Whether you have a one-on-one business like me, and I'm like, no, I actually do like technically have capacity for clients, but like this is too much. Or if let's say you have a program one-to-many, and you're like, you know what, one-to-many, but like we used to be that we could hold 20 people in this, but like, no, we're gonna have like 6 people in this because like I don't want to deal with that bullshit, right? You can see how, or just capacity, like in terms of energetic throughout the week for your marketing. We can see how that will really affect your scaling. But the other place I really see this happen is not just with capacity, but where I will still see people sort of do this thing. If you're listening on the replay, in the vault, I'm doing kind of the push-pull, like the come towards me, push away towards me movement. It makes me think of the Carolyn Elliott quote that I feel like I use all the time, which is, we don't get what we say we want, we get what we actually want. Meaning, you can say you want to scale your business. You can say you want to get fully booked. You can say you want to make more money. But if subconsciously what you actually want is to stay safe and not to have another scary client and not to have to put up with bullshit and not to have to deal with this ever again, you can say you want more clients all you want. But basically what you're saying you really want is, I don't want anything else, right? I don't want any more of this. And your brain is not really gonna, like, your brain doesn't filter for, like, let me try to get logical and think about what that really means. Your brain is very literal for that. And what you're basically telling your brain is, what you are operating for and what you are filtering for is no more clients. So we can see how this is really important for us to talk about, because yes, like all the reasons for the scary clients make sense, but if it's happening more for the reasons we talked about, we could try to just put up a big wall and say, don't ever come into my business, but that doesn't really, like, putting up big walls doesn't serve most businesses. I think instead we want to look at, how do we have a different way of internalizing this and dealing with this, because otherwise this starts to affect your ability to scale and make more revenue. Brittany says yes. I'm so glad this is landing for you, Brittany, and definitely let me know if you have questions as we're going through this as well. Happy to dig into this more. So I think just in terms of like where I see this showing up, because I do think this is helpful to notice in case you're listening to this, you're like, nah, that's not me. I know because this is shit. I've worked with so many clients who are very self-aware, who are very successful. I think this is really sneaky and insidious, and that's why it is scary in air quotes. Again, I see it happen in marketing. So what I see is I will see clients selling in their marketing and putting it back in their marketing, but it's, they're just really pulling back on speaking to results or speaking to how they can help someone or even speaking to that they have availability. I will see clients completely pull back and they're like, I'm just too busy. I'm at capacity, right? So I'm just going to focus on delivery. I have one client in particular who comes to mind. This happened and it was such a fear of burnout that she was just focused on deliverability and the bare minimum. There were some other things going on, but the number one thing we focused on was this piece, and then from that leaning into marketing. And she's like had her best year ever. She surpassed all of last year's revenue like this. I think like by June, she had a 17 cake month. Like it is wild how this was showing up everywhere. And obviously we worked on different strategic pieces, but like this was the main thing we focused on that really shifted things in her business, because she literally wasn't marketing. And when she was marketing, she didn't in her mind have capacity to bring in anything. So that combination just literally capped everything for her. Again, this will subconsciously have you create less demand, or say you're at capacity. It will have you overgive in containers, and it will have you carry responsibilities that aren't yours. I think we forget that capacity can be literal and physical capacity. It can also be energetic capacity. And so taking on responsibility that isn't yours will definitely affect your energetic capacity. And then I think there's also a mindset capacity there. Okay, so let's talk about how to do about this, because I think when these sorts of things happen in our business, what we tend to want to do is we want to try to control things. I am a high achiever. I am an high functioning PTSD, anxious, I don't know, all the things, right? I am someone who loves me some control. I'm an entrepreneur through and through, so I get it. I'm a control or recovering control freak, I should say. I get the want for control. I've also done a lot of work around this because it is, as we all know, what is it, the AA mantra? It's like the serenity prayer in terms of like, God help me or grant me the wisdom to help me see the things that I can control and like to surrender the things I can't. I'm probably butchering that there. I've really had to work on that over my 11, 12 years coaching, because we'll talk about it here, but I just have to think about this even with one-on-one clients. I can't control my one-on-one clients, and the more I try to control them, literally the less beneficial I am as a coach, the less supportive I am, the more I create a unhealthy dynamic with clients because I'm trying to control them, their results. I have a revenue share model. I literally cannot control my scaling, right? So like it is just it's something I'm very familiar with. So I'm saying that, so don't think anyone I'm calling you out, but also I can really see the benefits of looking at how important it is to let go of that and to see the solution to most things in our business. When we're feeling fear, when we're feeling uncertain, when we're feeling scared, when we're feeling triggered, when we've had a scary client, it's not how do I control this more? How do I fix this more? But that is what most of us, if you're here, right, we have wiring that says the way to handle this is to fix this, it's to control this, it's to make sure this never happens again. And I get that, right? It's kind of logical. I have been hurt. How do I make sure this never happens again? But if we look at an example outside of our business, take dating, for example. Who has not ever had a bad date in their life, right? Or who hasn't ever been in a dating situation that hasn't been the best? Maybe there's a few people who like met their person when they were 17 or something. But for most of us, right, we've had a not great dating experience. And as someone who is very, very happily married to a man who I think is a unicorn and has, holy shit, had some, I've shared this with y'all before, but like my ex turned into a raging addict who spent $10,000 of my money on a bender and went missing for days, and I had to check him into rehab before we broke up. Like, talk about like a crazy like ex situation. If we have a situation like that happen, right, and our response to that, right, that's a scary ex, right, scary ex, scary client, scary ex client, And our response is, I'm going to make sure that never happens again. I'm going to either fix that and overcompensate that, or I'm going to control things so that never happens again. What we do is we limit our field so small because there is no fucking way to control other people, other situations, right? If I could control the world, oh my goodness, so much would not be happening right now, right? Like, I think that's why, as a recovering control freak, I'm having a particularly hard time right now because there's so much I can't control that I wish I could. So going back to that example, if I just try to control things and make sure that never happens again, basically my option is to accept that I'm just either never going to date again or I'm never going to be in a relationship, right? Like, if I'm just like, I'm going to make sure I control this and protect myself to make sure I never get hurt again, I can do that, but it means I can't ever have a relationship, right? The only way I could meet my husband, the only way I can have a beautiful marriage was me saying I had to have a different way to navigate this. The way to navigate this is not to make sure I just put up this huge bubble and make sure this never happens again. The way to navigate this is to say, I gotta run at this again and see that I have the capacity to handle, I trust myself to handle, and ideally to spot it faster if I'm in a relationship that isn't healthy, that doesn't serve me, right? That was actually, like, that is the only, like, truly the only way I was able to meet my husband, have a really, like, everybody loves their husband, I hope. But I do think I have a particularly unicorn husband, right? So going back to scary clients, our tendency is, how do I make sure this never happens again? How do I protect myself from this? How do I put up a big wall of boundaries? How, not to say boundaries aren't beneficial, but how do I, like, stop this from happening? And what we do, we can just even see, if I'm going to stop this from happening, and this is something you can't necessarily control, well, there are some things we can put in place, but what we do is we literally, that's how we put up that block, right? And then our brain says, great, the way we're going to do that is no more clients come in, no more revenue comes in. Good, done. Now this won't happen again, because that's the only way you can guarantee this doesn't happen, as opposed to, and what I coach my clients around is, look, the annoying truth in business is we can minimize this, right? We can have strong boundaries. We can look at how our containers are set up. We can look at our part in the dynamic. We can look at how we communicate things. We can look at where are we, and I'll share some of these tools, but like, what's our responsibility, what's not our responsibility, like, are we clear on that? And I will share about that a little bit more. But first and foremost, if we don't look at the reality of, it is just nearly impossible to have a bigger business without some of these things happening. I know I talk about this with content all the time. If you want to get more visible, if you want to grow a bigger audience, you can't say you want that and also say, but I want to make sure I never have a hater or someone who doesn't like me or someone who doesn't like my content. Like, those two things do not live in the same world. It's so annoying, I know, as someone who is a recovering people pleaser and has a huge trigger around people not liking me or misunderstanding me. I feel you on that. And what I've just really had to learn over my decade in business is, it can't be both. If I want to be more visible, if I want to have a bigger business, if I want to have a bigger impact, I just have to be okay with what comes with that, which means more humans, which means more unhinged people in my world, which means I might get some haters. I actually don't get that many, thankfully, but I have to be available for that. If we don't want scary clients, the best way to make sure you never get a scary client is to limit your success. But if you actually want more success and you want to have more clients and you want to have more revenue and you want to have a bigger business, trying to say I'm never going to have a scary client just means you put up a wall and means you focus on not getting clients. The real win is, how do I resource myself enough to know that I have the capacity to navigate a scary client if another one comes in, that I have the tools, that I am resourced and I have the tools to navigate this, that I understand what's going on and I can solve for this. That's really, in my opinion, the way to both handle this, but the way to actually allow this to not derail your business and to set yourself up to scale. Let me know if this is making sense. I also am available for you to be like, Kim, I hate this conversation because I want to know how to make sure this never happens. I totally hear you on that. I've been blessed with I love my clients so much. I'm good friends with some of my clients. I've had friends hire me. I have clients who've worked with me for 5-6 years. Most of my clients work with me long term. Like, I love my clients so much. I am truly blessed with the best clients. And even with me saying that, I've absolutely had scary clients, and some kind of, like, where you're just like, I can't believe that just happened. Like, thankfully I have a coach to talk through this. I can't believe that just, like, did that just happen? So I just say that to normalize that. And I wouldn't be having this conversation if I didn't think it was so important to both normalize, but to also see, I truly do not think I would love my one-on-one business so much, stick with one-on-one, have the relationship I do with my clients, be able to support my clients to get the results they do, have the results I do in my business, if I had tried to make sure I never had a client like that ever again, and as opposed to seeing it was an outlier situation and seeing that sucked. That was not fun. That was really tough to hold. That was really tough to navigate. That was really tough to sit with someone in. That was really tough to have a narcissist do some wild stuff, right? Like all of that, and to see, and I trusted myself to navigate that. I was capable to handle that. I was resourced to handle that. My business was totally fine, right? I navigated it in a way that I'm really proud of. Focusing on that instead is what's allowed me to continue to run my business, to continue to hold the clients I do, to continue to sell, to continue to scale my revenue, right? To continue to attract really great clients as opposed to attracting more of the same. It's kind of a side note there, but I do think, I don't know if this is woo. I think this is more how brains work. I think when we have patterns, we tend to subconsciously continue to create the same pattern over and over again until we've worked through it. And so I think when we have a pattern like this with clients as well, and we can talk a little bit about how to shift those patterns after this, if that's helpful. But I think then we will subconsciously attract more of the same, because like attracts like, right? And patterns are usually because of, we'll go back to my ex, for example. If I didn't work through those things that were my part of that relationship and the codependency there, I would have just kept attracting more of the same, right? I had to work through those things, or I would have the story that everybody was like my ex, and it's like, is everybody like your ex, or is everybody like you attracting someone like your ex because you're playing out a pattern together? Hopefully this is making sense. So it's the same thing in our business. So I do think if we don't look at these things, right, we will tend to just attract more and more of the same until we work through some of those things. But because I worked through those things with my ex, right, I got my butt into therapy, and because I also looked at, wow, I'm really proud of how I navigated that. I handled that shit. Like, it sucked. That sucked. I wouldn't wish that, like, I will spare you all the details, but like some crazy shit went down. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. And I navigated it. I handled it. I was totally fine. It sucked for a second, and I moved through it. And I'm really proud of how I handled it. And I'm really proud of how I handled all of that. So because of that, right, I felt resourced. I felt capable. I didn't feel scared to keep dating, attract someone new. Maybe I did it first, but same if we applied that to business and with clients. That is the win for you. And I mean, that's the thing to bring to your coaching as well, right? I think so often we want to bring to our coach, fix this for me, make this not happen, make this go away because it sucks. And I get that. Like, none of us like to be in pain, as opposed to how can we look at what was my part in this? Do I have a part in this, or am I a real victim to a circumstance? Is there something I need to clean up here? But also, how can I resource myself to handle this and to build my trust, or to see that I trust myself here, or to build that trust that I can handle those kinds of things? When you have that kind of self-trust, you are unstoppable in business. I know I've probably said this before, and I want to see these comments in different ways, but I said this when I posted something at the beginning of the year, political, and I literally got about, I think, 1,000 hate comments, and I forgot what I posted, but I posted something along the lines of, like, this was my biggest fear in business. I got bullied when I was younger, so I have, like, such a fear of people coming after me and hating me, and I got bullied because people didn't like me, basically, for who I was, just to give context there. And the reason I share that is, like, sharing something and having people come after me, and for, like, sharing something that was like, no, but I'm trying to, like, share something positive here, is, like, one of my biggest, like, being misunderstood, or, like, making someone feel bad, or making someone not feel good, like, literally one of my biggest, like, fears, triggers. And I got 1,000 hate comments, and I was like, oh, like, I'm fine. Like, this is a blip. These are actually laughable because I so believe in what I'm doing, because I feel resourced to navigate this, because I don't argue with crazy in the comments. And it was the best thing that could have possibly happened to me. And the reason I'm saying that is for this conversation here. I think sometimes we fear these things and we try to do so much to avoid them happening, when the reality is that is the thing that is blocking us from all the things we say we want, versus when we lean into the scary thing, not only do we often get the thing we want, but if the scary thing happens, it's usually not as bad as we think it is. It's usually the fear of the thing is far worse than the thing itself. That stuff with my ex, I wouldn't wish that on anyone, but also like kind of the best thing that ever happened to me. Like after that, like when I was dating, I was like bring it. There's like nothing you can do. And I am like so resourced to handle this and to like make sure I know what I'm looking for in my like right partner, right? Like it actually helped me to build that self-trust. And so I say that again because I think we just go around about this really trying to protect ourselves instead of seeing how can I resource myself? How can I say I can handle this? How can I build my self-trust up around this? How can I go after kind of more of the same? Not like saying we're literally going after scary clients or problematic people to date, but in this way of when I run at what I'm scared of, as opposed to try to prevent myself or run away from it, I'm also running towards all of the things I want, because everything we want, it's so cheesy, right? But it's on the other side of fear. And everything we want, like it tends to open up the possibility that some of those scary, like we kind of can't have the things we want without a possibility of those scary things happening. But again, those scary things happening usually are far less impactful than our brains make them be. Okay, I want to read these comments and then I've got more to say on this. Brittany says, just knowing how to put the tools in place and how to go about it when it does happen. Okay, I'll share a little bit about that. Tara says, I just try to do the best I can and have the things in place to handle it. And with clients, because one of my clients went through a big refund thing this year, it's looking at if there are gaps we need to close on anything that could have been done different. Sometimes there really isn't, and truly it is just that there are people who are going to push boundaries regardless of what you have in place. 1,000%, Tara. I think that's such a, both of these are great. We can talk a little bit about like kind of what to do here. I think I'll pick up from what Tara is saying here, and then Brittany, I'll speak to some other tools. I think to what Tara is saying, let me pull up my notes because I did make notes and probably gonna like totally be off on tangents here. To what Tara is saying, I think if and when, not to say this will happen, but most likely if you're in business for a decade or more, right? Again, these are outlier situations. If these are happening consistently and often, I do think it's something that is really worth bringing to your coach, to your container, bringing to your journal to try to look at what's going on here. If it's an outlier situation, I think it's still helpful to take a look at with your coach, your support. But I think we have to be very mindful with it, because if, I'll use myself as an example, if I've had one person over the last, I don't know, 5 years or something like that, and I don't know however many clients that is, like have some kind of behavior that is in air quotes scary, right? That's such a small percentage. And so what I think we can sometimes do is overly fixate on what happened here that I can course correct for, as opposed to seeing this is a very, very small percentage. It's no different than when we're looking at, if you're looking at your landing pages, if you're looking at your opt-ins, if you're looking at anything in your business metrics wise, and there is this really small percentage shift, or like you're just not going to spend a lot of attention or time on that. If it's like a very small percentage impact or a very small percentage shift, we want to look at kind of where the more consistent things are. That being said, one of the first things I always want to look at with clients is what is actually true here, because we still have to navigate this with a client, and where does the responsibility lie? We do have a responsibility in if nothing else, we are in some way co-creating with another client. So I like to take as kind of what Tara's saying here. I think we still have to navigate the situation, and it's nothing else you're gonna have to emotionally navigate. And so I think getting really clear on what is actually factually true, right? If you have a lot of emotions, can you work through those and park those to the side? So when you're at neutral, what is factually true? What has actually happened here? This client wants a refund because they watched one module in the program and said they didn't get results and the program doesn't work. Okay, those are the facts. Or this client wants a refund. They went through the entire program. They showed up to every single call-in session. They really, really tried and they're frustrated. Or this client wants a refund. They signed up for this program and they didn't get any of the course modules. I was unexpectedly sick and I missed 5 calls and I had to have my team sub in and right? These are very, very different situations. So we want to take a look at what's going on, and then where does the responsibility lie? If there is something in which you made a mistake, you dropped the ball, you were human, team made a mistake, you didn't deliver, there was a miscommunication, there was a misfit, 8 years ago had someone hire me, and she really thought that my coaching was going to be like a step-by-step form. Like every call was going to be like me teaching her like a step-by-step, I don't know, process in business. She was a beautiful, wonderful client, and she showed up beautifully. And I thought I had been very clear in my marketing, and I still think I am clear, but there had been a miscommunication, right? And she wanted to leave the container. That's a really great example of, because I was neutral, it's really easy to look at that and be like, okay, I mean, both things are true here, but what is actually true is I'm not going to be able to deliver on what she wants. That's a really, like, that was just a really easy place for me to like bless and release her and say, oh, like, I'm sorry you thought that that's how I coach, but I do not. You definitely shouldn't work, like, I love you, but you should definitely not work with me. Like, I'm going to release you from your contract. Versus if I have a client who has shown up for every, knows my program, shown up for every program session. I've been over delivering in between sessions, and then is saying this doesn't work, or they want a refund. Like, that's a very, very different situation, kind of going back to what we were talking about here. So looking at what's actually going on, and then seeing where does the responsibility, what is your responsibility? What is your client's responsibility? I think this is just also always a helpful tool. I always like to look at what's mine and what's my client's. I give this to clients often as a homework assignment. I highly recommend it. Write down, what is your responsibility? What is your responsibility to show up 100% for? What is your client's responsibility to show up 100% for in the container to get the best results? If we think about any container, any healthy relationship, it is two parties showing up 100% for their part. Things get wackadoo when we have two parties and we are expecting one person to show up to 100% or one person to show up 150% in either direction, right? As a service provider, if I expect my client to show up 180% for the container, that's a problem. If a client expects me to show up 180% run their business for them, that's a problem, right? We each have a role. We need to know what that role is, and we each are responsible for showing up 100% for that role. So I think that can be really helpful. And then going back to, what is mine to clean up here? Do I have something to clean up? Do I have something to take ownership for? Let's just say you got sick. You got unexpectedly sick. You had to miss a bunch of calls. You were traveling. You made mistakes. You dropped the ball. I've had a client who got really, actually I had someone on my team in the past who got really overbooked, and they dropped the ball on a bunch of stuff for us, right? And they had to take responsibility and ownership for that, right? So where do we need to take responsibility, and where do we need to give responsibility back to the client? I think that is just the easiest way to like actually practically navigate these things when they happen, and is to get really clear on like neutrally what needs to be done. The next thing I then like to look at is sort of doing a debrief with a client afterwards in terms of like, basically, how did this happen? Is it an outlier situation, or do we have an opportunity to clean up boundaries? Do we have an opportunity to clean up communication? Communication, contracts are boundaries. And so, and Tara, just because you were commenting on this, I'd be curious to hear if there's anything you want to add to that, or Brittany, if you have a question around this. But I think it is really helpful for us to revisit that, because sometimes, let's use the example of someone comes into your course or program and they only go through a module or two and they're really frustrated, or they like didn't get the support they wanted, they want a refund. It's an outlier situation, right? You've navigated it. And it can still be helpful to go back and say, great, this is an outlier situation, but how do we minimize this from happening? Did we have really clear onboarding materials? Is there an opportunity for us to create a video or a document that outlines how to get the most out of this program, where the modules are found, what order to watch them in, how to utilize the group container? I'll use myself as an example. I don't know if my clients always read it, but I have a welcome packet for them that goes through some things, like in terms of how to get the most out of their investment, how to, like, what they can bring to session, how they can use Basecamp. I make sure on client sessions, especially with new clients, to let them know towards the end of a call, like, to remind them that I'm there for them between session, right? I do think there are things that, are they technically your responsibility? I don't know. I think they kind of are as a service provider, right? And so sometimes these things happen, and sure, it's not your fault in air quotes, and maybe it was a scary client and we need to level set, like reset those boundaries with someone, and maybe you don't owe someone a refund, so to say. And it can also often be an opportunity for us in terms of where we can clean up some communication, some boundaries, level setting expectations for people. I think that even goes with results. I'm a really big fan of level setting expectations with results, especially in the trust recession, especially with how many inflated promises are out there, and that there are people out there teaching people to lie about their results in their marketing. it, like, as someone who's like, if I'm a dollar away from something, I won't even share it. Like it baffles my mind, but that is happening out there, and so people have been burned by that. So I am really big on level setting expectations. I know speaking to results is important for us. I know a lot of my clients minimize results, don't share results because they want to overcompensate. That is not what I'm talking about. Please talk about your results. Please don't feel like you can't talk about money. Please, for the love of all good things, that is helpful for your business, but that's also helpful for your clients. That's helpful for attracting the right people. And we can also level set expectations. I know if this is just a good example, right, to minimize these sorts of things from happening. I know and not to protect, right? There's a big difference between how do I protect myself and put up a wall versus how do I minimize and have some healthy boundaries, some healthy communication. I know one of the things I'm really big on is if I'm meeting with a potential client who's like, well, do you think I'll be able to make X amount in 3 months? Or like, what do you think is possible for me? Or I have a client who comes to mind who came to me with an idea to scale, and I was just really, really honest in terms of what she brought to me in particular was a particularly challenging business model and a particularly challenging setup, and I was just really honest in terms of, look, I think all the things are possible, and I'm here to hold the vision of you being the unicorn and the outlier, and practically speaking, here's what's involved. Practically speaking, here's what this is what I've seen as more normal in terms of level setting those expectations. So I think all of those things can go a long way to prevent you from having a haunted house of scary clients versus trying to protect yourself by I think what happens for us so often when this happens is we hear boundaries and we're like, or we hear level set expectations and we hear I need to pendulum swing and never talk about results or like overly talk about how hard business is, right? That's overcompensating versus level setting expectations. Or we hear set clear boundaries and we hear boundary, but what we do instead is we put up a big wall. Boundaries are not a wall. Boundary is not keep everybody out, right? Boundaries are there. Boundaries are there so that you have some parameters for what feels safe for you and your clients so that there is actually a safer space to both sit in the discomfort, right? I have boundaries in my business so my clients know, so they feel safer, so they feel okay and know what to expect leaning in, so we can actually have some of the hard conversations, so we can sit in discomfort, so they can get mad at me in a container because, I say mad jokingly around, but because I'm asking them a hard question, or so that they can project on me because they're human, right? Like these are all normal things that will happen. That's not a scary client, by the way. I feel like that's important to say. A scary client is not a client who brings you a problem, who keeps bringing the same problem, who's struggling, who says they're not getting results, who's scared, who projects on you, in a non-abusive way, who is upset, who gets frustrated with you, who has resistance, who doesn't listen, who doesn't take action. That's not a scary client. That's called a client who is leaning into support and why we have fucking jobs. That is a different rant that I will say for a different live stream. That's not a scary client. A scary client is someone who is not taking responsibility for their part in the container and either being abusive to you or not using the container and asking for a refund, things like that, causing problems for you. So that just feels important to name there. But going back to boundaries, I think we can think boundaries that are like, I'm not available for any of that, or I need to put up such a wall, or you can only leave me one message a day between session and base camp and it can only be 2 sentences long, or you can only leave me a 1-minute Voxer because I'm so scared you're going to send me an hour long, versus how they're not meant to be these strict walls. It's really boundaries are meant to help people know what is and is not okay for us, right? I'm very clear with my clients on my boundaries between session support, for example, right? But it's also my job to set and hold that boundary, but it's also there so that they feel safe enough to lean in to the container. And so I feel like there's a safe enough container for us to do great work together in those uncomfortable times. I think we want to, so I think just remember, like, those boundaries can really help you. But again, boundaries is not pushing away. Level setting expectations can really help you. Expectation setting is not the same as saying, this is impossible, this is hard, or I'd ever talk about results. Just like normalizing for yourself what a normal client service provider relationship is and what is normal in the container to come up, right? That is great for you versus, again, we can just pendulum swing here, either where we're like almost like codependent with clients where it's like anything and everything, and it's just like a mess is allowed, right? People can leave you 45-minute messages crying about everything and anything, or we try to put up these really strict walls, right? It's finding that middle ground there. And then the other piece is that responsibility. I think knowing your role, knowing your client's role, and what you're both responsible to show up for, I think those can all really support you for when this happens, but also to prevent this from happening, to be able to navigate this. And then I would say, big picture, the biggest thing that can support you here is seeing that the more you can build your resilience and self-trust, that when scary things happen with clients, in the industry, in the economy, with the internet, with reach, with ad prices, with anything that's going on, the more you can build the resilience and the self-trust that you are capable and able to navigate it and handle it, versus thinking I need to make sure this never happens, or I have to figure out how to fix and control this right away. The more you can have the resilience and the self-trust that if something unknown happens, I trust I've got me and I can handle this and I can figure it out, the more you will expand your capacity, and you will be able to scale, and you will be able to tolerate whether it's a scary client, a scary comment, a scary hater, a scary algorithm change, whatever that is that's going on. I think truly that is the internal skill set that is required to scale. I just want to see here. Okay. Tara says, oh my God, on the results thing. This is something also that I will never guarantee a certain amount, and I'm super honest about what it'll take and what I think could happen for a client. When clients are talking about it, I have a few fitness coach clients. And so when it's in terms of weight loss, we always talk about not guaranteeing a specific amount of weight will be lost in a certain amount of time, or any kinds of promises. I think leaving promises out completely is huge. You can't guarantee that anyone will get any result, because you can't guarantee that they'll show up and do their side of the work needed to get the results, even if you know they could potentially get certain results. I think that's so spot on, Tara. What comes up for me, just to put a button on what Tara says for everybody, and the way I think about it is, I will always speak to possibility. I think it is really important for me to speak to what is possible and what I genuinely have seen as possible through my own business and through my clients' businesses. And I think it's also really important for me, as I think people are coming to me as an expert, as they are coming to you as an expert, to both speak to what's possible, but also to speak to what the process is and to normalize what that usually takes. And so here's what's possible. If someone wants to come to me and they're like, I want to make $1 million in the next year. I've had clients do that, right? That is possible. And I need to set expectations based on where this client is at in their journey, and I know what it took for that client to get to $1 million in a year, right? Like, it took quite a bit. And so being able to level set those expectations, and I think if this is just helpful for everyone as a tool, one of the things I find really helpful is just to spell out, like, I just always feel like I can just always give people the option. So I had someone who came to me who they wanted to build out a passive revenue stream to hit a certain amount of revenue. It was definitely, I have helped people do that. That is something that's very possible. And I know how the sausage is made and what goes into that. And so instead of like getting into all of this stuff around like, here's what's hard, here's what's not hard, I just presented, here's what I think it will take. And then presented the option, like, does that feel like something you want to do, or like, does that feel like something you're up for? And I think in that way, this is where it can be really helpful, like, for you to be in your role as an expert, for you to still speak to what's possible, but also to level set. Like, you can, and I will often say, I'm sure I could look at most emails to anybody who's ever asked me this. I will never promise or guarantee a result, and I would run away from anybody who promises and guarantees. Literally, I would run away from anybody who gives you a promise or a guarantee, at least with monetary results. Fitness and health is a good example. I would run in the other direction. But I can speak to what I've seen to be true with other clients. I can speak to what is possible, and I can speak to how I would approach this. And here's what in terms of level setting, here's what I would expect we would need to focus on, or like, here's what I would expect that would require. Is that something that feels good to you? Is that something you want to be on board with? And so I think that's just a helpful tool for all of us. I do the same thing when clients have a couple of, like, they want to do something that I could care less if the client listens to me, right? I am not the boss of their business. Also, sometimes I'm fucking wrong. My job is not to be right. My job is to help my clients get clear on what's right for them, to look at the data, to figure out what the right next move for them is, like, get clear on what their gut is telling them, to put strategy around that. So a lot of times what I will just do is present options to a client and let them decide and choose. But I'll present options and also share, like, hey, option A, I have seen play out in this way. Option B I've seen play out in this way. Or option A has these trade-offs. Option B has these trade-offs. Like what feels best to you? So if that's just helpful, I think that can be a tool when you're level setting expectations or having these conversations in terms of preventing versus protecting. And the only reason I say that is I think sometimes we can pendulum swing a little bit and do so much to be like, I think this is basically impossible because I want to make sure I'm not on the hook for promising this result. And Tara, I do not think you're saying that at all, but I have just seen this with people. And I think we just want to be so mindful because that isn't supportive either. I mean, the truth is anything is possible. And I have seen some wild, like possible, like amazing results. Clients have replaced corporate income in 3 months. I've had clients scale to $1 million in a year. I've had, all sorts of like things that seem really wild. So I think it's really beneficial for us to hold to what's possible and to not trample on a client's expansion or vision while also level setting those expectations or being kind of like the grounding truth in terms of what that takes. And I think in that way we can do that without, again, pendulum swinging and just talking about like how this is impossible or I can't promise this or you can't get this or like no one's doing this, because I think Tara is not saying that, but I do think sometimes I've just seen that with clients will just try to self-protect that way. Brittany says there's no guarantee for the outcome of helping dogs and humans too. Yes, it's so true, right? Because you work with dogs and humans. And she says, thank you for saying to run away if there is one. It's just so true. Brittany is responding to when I said run away from anybody who's making a promise or a guarantee in that way. I will say what I do promise clients, if this is helpful for y'all, then I want to see Tara's comment. What I do promise clients is I promise I will show up 100% for your investment. I promise I will show up 100% for my job, for my role, right? And I mean that. I know what my 100% is, and I know what my client's 100% is. And so what I will also often say to a client is this is helpful for everyone just in terms of kind of navigating these things or like preventing these things in terms of some of the tools, is I will also say to a potential client, and the clients I see who get the biggest results and the best results, like what you're talking about, this is how they show up, right? And I'll list those things. And, they're usually really ready to lean in and do the work. They're ready to show up for the coaching. They're ready to be uncomfortable. They're ready to test things. They're ready to execute, right? They're ready to do whatever, the 3 things I mentioned. Does that feel like what you're ready to show up for 100%? Because if you believe you're ready to show up 100% for that, I believe I'm ready to show up 100% for that, right? I think that we have a really good chance here. We can make a really good team. I think you can trust yourself to make this investment, right? I think that's a way to navigate this conversation without anybody making promises. But where you can also really speak to, here's what I know I can promise to show up 100% for my clients. I just also know I promise to not show up to do their job for them, because that ruins the coaching and no one wants me to be their fucking boss. Right. And so I think in that way we can still make promises. And I think a lot of times, we're like way past time here. I'm going to wrap this conversation up, but it's just popping through. I think it's helpful to remember a lot of times when people are asking for promises, they're not really asking for us to guarantee they could lose weight or make X amount of money. What they're really saying is, I either don't trust you, I've been burned before, or I don't trust myself to show up for this. Like I need some reassurance here. And so this is like a whole different conversation, but I think this is where also for us as service providers, especially whether it's one-to-many or one-on-one, to really think about what is someone really asking for? What's the thing under the thing here? Because that's really the powerful conversation to have that's gonna, again, help minimize scary clients and also help you attract the best fit clients. Because anybody who is looking for you to take all the responsibility or who is looking for you to fix things or to guarantee things, I promise you is a scary client. But there are lots of amazing clients, right, who just need some reassurance. Okay, Tara says, yeah, definitely presenting the possibilities, just not as an absolute guarantee. 1,010%, Tara, well said. Brittany says, love the outline and sharing that from being upfront about it. So glad that's helpful. All right, y'all, I went way over. I've been trying to be more concise, and clearly I am failing at that. So evidence that you can aim to do something in your business and still have a wildly successful business and not do things perfectly. But this all felt really important to talk about. So I hope a little bit longer was valuable for you, those extra nuggets, and not overwhelming. I will be back next week with another live stream. If you have any questions as you're listening on the replay, drop them below. A reminder, if you have the resources and you are able to, financial donations to your local food banks right now will go a really, really long way. And if you're interested in getting support in your business to help you get clear on how to navigate these situations when, they do happen, but also to look at what are the subconscious things that can come up for all of us that might be preventing you from scaling your business, and what are the practical solutions so that you can trust yourself more to scale your revenue in a way that feels sustainable and in a way that is simple, along with all the practical strategy. That is what I love to support my clients with. I only offer high-level, high-touch one-on-one coaching, so I am fully booked, but I will drop a free coaching consultation so that you can have a chat with me either about my next waitlist one-on-one spot for my 6-month container or for my next week-long strategy intensive. I will open up one of those up in November for the intensive. So I'll drop the link for that below. Love to connect with you if you're interested. And then I'll be back next week and we'll dive in more then. All right. Love y'all. Bye.